Building a checkpoint network, starting with the infrastructure. Our objective for this MicroNugget is really simple. We want to put the infrastructure in place for our checkpoint network. Here's how we're going to start. We're going to install the operating system called Gaia on this server and this server. This will be our management server once we tell it that, and this one will be our gateway. Now the question is, Keith, well, once you install the operating system called Gaia, how do you tell these devices that you're a manager and you're a firewall? The way we do that is once we have the operating system installed, we're going to connect via HTTPS, and that's where we tell this guy, hey, you're a manager and you are a gateway. Now this is called a distributed deployment. We could also install the manager and gateway on the same physical box, and that would be considered a standalone checkpoint deployment. In most networks, we're going to have distributed roles, manager on one box and gateway on a separate box. Also from HTTPS, we're going to configure the interfaces to make sure that if we have additional interfaces we need to configure, or static routes or routing, we're going to configure all that as well right from HTTPS. Then the last step is to download these Smart Console clients. Primarily, we're after Smart Dashboard, and we sit right here at this Windows computer using Smart Dashboard, which is connected to the manager where we create all of our policies and rules. And then when we're ready, we tell the manager to push those policies out to the gateway for enforcement. So our first step is going to be to install the Gaia operating system. So I simply booted the management server from a CD-ROM. I'm going to press enter to say, please install Gaia on this system. We get a confirmation saying, do we want to proceed? We'll press enter for OK. We'll pick the US keyboard. We'll accept the defaults for the allocation of the disk space. We'll provide a password for the admin account and press OK. And then we'll give this management server its IP address of 10.0.0.2 with a default gateway of the IP address that the gateway will have after we configure it, and we'll select OK. Then we're going to select OK one more time to confirm, and it's going to install. And now that the Gaia operating system is installed on the device that will be our manager, we are going to do a reboot. So here on the device that will be our gateway, we're going to do the exact same thing. We boot from the Gaia CD and provide the basic information, such as the IP address, the password for the administrator, and a default gateway. So we have a confirmation message. We'll press OK. We'll accept the keyboard. We'll supply a password for the admin account on the device that will be our gateway, which is firewall 1. We'll press OK. It sees that we have two interfaces. E0 goes out to the outside, E1 goes to the inside. I want to configure E1 first because it's on the E1 interface that the manager is going to communicate with that firewall. So with E1 selected, we'll go ahead and press OK. We'll put in the correct IP address for E1 interface. We can add the IP address of E0 and the default gateway that it should use once we connect via HTTPS. We'll press OK to confirm that we're ready to continue. And now the install is going to complete. So on this device that will be our gateway, it's telling us to reboot and to come back using HTTPS to this IP address to finish off the configuration and assign its roles. So we'll press enter to reboot that. So now Gaia is installed on both the device that will be the manager and the device that will be our gateway. And now we're going to connect via HTTPS to specify their roles. We'll specify to this guy, hey, you're going to be a manager. And we'll tell this guy, hey, you're going to be a gateway. We can also configure any additional interfaces or static routes or routing that we need to while we're connected via HTTPS. So I've connected to 10.0.0.2, and because this device has a self-signed certificate, my browser is saying, whoa there, Will Robinson, are you sure you want to continue? In our case, I do. We'll log in using the password that we configured on that box at 10.0.0.2. Click login. And from here, we're simply going to click next to follow the wizard. We can set the date and time. We can configure an NTP server. We can give this guy a name. I'm going to call him manager. He's already got his IP address at 10.0.0.2, which is perfect. His default gateway is perfect. I'm going to click on next. And it's on this screen where we get to say, hey, you are a security management server. With this checkbox selected, and the security gateway deselected, so it's just doing dedicated management responsibilities, we'll click on next. We'll create an administrative account for this management server. We'll click on next. We can specify restrictions as far as who's allowed to connect to this management server. Click on next, and then click on finish, and then a final confirmation, and it does its magic. Meanwhile, while that's cooking, let's also go with HTTPS over to the IP address of the gateway. So over at 10.0.0.111 is saying, hey, the self-signed certificate isn't trusted by your browser either. That's okay in this case, because we just installed it. We'll put in the credentials to log in, and we'll run through the wizard. Now, keep in mind, this is the gateway device, or the device that is about to be the gateway. So we have the time page, we have the name page. I'm going to go ahead and call this gateway, and click on next. Its IP address is 10.0.0.111. We'll leave that as is. We'll click on next. And this is where we're going to tell it that we want it to be a security gateway, and it will be managed by that other box over at 10.0.0.2. We'll click on Next. It's not going to have a dynamically assigned IP, and we're going to specify an activation key. Now this activation key is just a phrase that we're going to use initially when the manager checks in and says, I want to take total control of you, Mr. Gateway. So it's just an initial way to confirm that the right manager is talking to the right gateway. And then once the manager talks to the gateway and initializes the communications, they're going to use digital certificates to authenticate each other based on name. So this activation key is like a one-time use. So we'll click on Next, and we'll click on Finish, and a Yes to confirm. Now at the end of our installation on this gateway, it's saying you must restart the system in order to finish the configuration. So we'll click on OK. So the reboot's completed on this gateway. It's automatically asking us to reconnect. So we'll supply the admin username and password and click Login. And so from here with network interfaces, if we want to configure the other interface, for example, the outside interface, Ethernet 0, simply double click on it, go ahead and click on the checkbox to enable it, and then specify the IP address you want to use. So in my test lab, this is the IP address I'm using on that outside interface. I'll click on OK, and we'll also go ahead and configure a static route. So in the static routes option on the left, we'll simply double click on the default route and simply add a gateway for the default route. And that's going to be 192.168.1.1, and we'll click on OK. And then we'll save that. And this is also where we can configure the details, for example, as a DHCP server, additional network interfaces, and so forth. But now that this is done, let's go ahead and close this. In fact, I'm going to log out of the gateway. So now we're sitting at the manager via HTTPS, and we have very similar options. For example, if we needed to configure static routes on this manager, and he has his default route pointing to the gateway, or if we needed to configure DNS information on this device, here's where we do all of that. But the really important part we need to do right here is under Overview, is there's this big green button that says, please download the Smart Console. Smart Console is a suite of applications that we're going to use on our Windows computer that lets us manage the checkpoint environment. And the primary tool that we're going to use is Smart Dashboard. So we're going to click Download Now. So that is downloading as we speak in the bottom left-hand corner of my browser. And now that it's downloaded, we'll go ahead and install it. Meanwhile, while this program is installing on our local Windows computer, I can go ahead and sign out and close the browser session that we have over to the manager. So we have a little overview page for Smart Console for R76. We'll click on Next, and we can select to install everything or simply certain clients. Because you never know what we might want to try or use, I'm going to install everything by clicking Next. And in just a few moments, those tools will all be available on this Windows computer. So now that the installation is complete, we'll click on Finish. It's automatically going to launch Smart Dashboard. We'll put in the username, we'll put in the IP address of that management server, and we'll click Login. And now we have Smart Dashboard running. We also can get to our other Smart Client utilities by using this drop-down right here to get to Smart View Tracker, Smart View Monitor, and the other really smart tools that Checkpoint provides for us. You know, one last step, since we're here, we really need to make sure this manager can communicate and manage that gateway. And to do that, we're going to go to our network objects and right-click on Checkpoint and say, I want to add a new gateway. We'll go ahead and use the classic mode. We'll put in the IP address. We'll specify what features we want enabled on that gateway. They refer to these as software blades. So for the moment, we'll just say that we want firewall services on that gateway. And then we'll click on Communication. And it says, what's that one-time password we need to get the ball rolling with this device? So we'll put that password in. That's the one we configured on the gateway. We'll click on Initialize. In the bottom it says Trust Established, which is great. We'll click on OK. In the background, it just went out, looked at the topology information for that gateway. This is just an overview of that information right here. We'll click on Close. We'll click on OK. So now the manager has generated and installed a certificate on that gateway. So now we can create policies right here and then push those policies out to the gateway for enforcement. In this video, you and I have taken a look at implementing a basic infrastructure for Checkpoint. I've got another MicroNugget on how to create and push out a policy that you also might be interested in. If you'd like even more Checkpoint training, hey, come and check out our courses at CBT Nuggets. I'd love to see you there. Meanwhile, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.